Session. Yep. Hello guys, and welcome all of you for this NPTEL Week 2 live problem solving session for the course Introduction to Semiconductor Devices, which is being conducted by Professor Naresh Kumar Imani from IIT Hyderabad. And just to give you my introduction again, as I'm seeing some new faces, so I'm Soham Lakhote, currently a third year PhD student doing my PhD at ISC Bangalore, and my core area of research is in the field of circuits, in the analog and RF circuits, especially for the radars on chip, that is radars that are fabricated on the semiconductors. And this is my core research area. We will start the session. So the agenda for today's session is like we will start solving the problems directly, as I have given you a bigger picture during the last week's meeting. And if some of you are not able to see, then I have uploaded it on my YouTube channel as well. So if some of you are not able to see that YouTube channel, then just let me know. By the end of this meeting, I will post the link for the YouTube channel again. So we'll directly start solving the problems, and I will explain the concepts whenever they are required. So now coming to this first problem. So I want this session to be interactive, so please feel free to interrupt me if you are not able to understand anything, and just let me know if I'm making any mistakes, and I will poke you in between to answer some of my questions which I will be asking. So coming to this first question. So a silicon at 300 Kelvin is doped with arsenic atoms such that the concentration of electrons is 7 into 10 to the power 15 centimeter, basic centimeter to the power minus 3. The position of it is asked like if we have to calculate the position of Fermi level with respect to EC and EFI. So as you know, we have EC, we have EV, we have EFI, which is very near to the mid gap. And since the semiconductor is doped with the arsenic atoms, which is nothing but the donor, so our EF level will obviously above EFI and it will be below the EC, right? So our EF will be somewhere over here. So now what they have asked is like we have to calculate, first is EC minus EF is the first thing, and second is we have to calculate EF minus EFI, right? So now by just seeing these two quantities, the equation, the first and the second one, you should know that we have to use the formula which contains the EC minus EF term, and for the second one we have to use the formula which contains the EF minus EFI term, right? So the formula for the first one, which will have that EC minus EF term, you can write it from the lecture notes as N naught, which will be equal to NC exponential minus of EC minus EF divided by KT, right? So now what we will do is like we will just take the this term on the left hand side and we will take log on both the sides. So what you will get is minus of EC minus EF, right? This will be equal to KT ln N naught by NC, correct? Now I just want to remove this minus term from the left hand side, so it will become EC minus EF will be KT ln NC by N naught, right? So now I just need to know whether NC is given to me. Yes, you can see in the brackets NC is given to me and N naught is also given to me, right? And KT has been mentioned that we have to take it as 25 milli electron volts. So now EC minus EF, so I'm just substituting the values over here now. So this will be equal to, this will be nothing but 0.025, right, into ln of, what is the value of NC? 2.8 into 10 to the power 19, and what is the value of N naught? That is the concentration of electrons, that is 7 into 10 to the power 15, right? So now if you calculate this value by using calci, and by the way, I want all of you to be ready with the calci. So now if you calculate this value using the calci, then it will come that EC minus EF will come out to be 0.207 electron volts. So I am just writing this as A. Okay, now we want to also calculate the EF minus EFI also, right? So now I will be using the second equation, which will be nothing but your N naught. Now instead of NC, I am writing this equation in terms of Ni, right? So now this will become exponential of, now this will become EF minus EFI divided by KT, right? So again, by taking this on left hand side and by taking the log, we will get EF minus EFI, that will be equal to KT ln of N naught divided by Ni, right? So hence EF minus EFI. So I will be just putting the values over here again. So it will 0.025 into log of, what is the value of N naught? 7 into 10 to the power 15. And what is the value of Ni? So Ni is 1.5 into 10 to the power 10, correct? So now if you calculate this value using your calc, you will be able to get EF minus EFI to be equal to 0.326 electron volts. Now we will just do a sanity check to make sure whether our answers are correct or not. See, this is a N-type doped semiconductor, right? So our EF should be always below the EC and EF should always be above EFI. So the positive sign over here, it is denoting that our EF is always above EFI and our EF is below the EC, right? So if our EF had came between EV and EFI, despite the fact that our semiconductor is N-type doped, then that is not a correct answer, right? But here that is not the case. So if you take this to A and B, basically A and B, from A and B you will be able to know that of course our EF, it is 0.207 below the EC, but it is 3.326 above the EFI, right? So you will be able to see this is the option, wait a minute, yeah, this is the option that is matching our answer, and hence you can see this is the correct answer for this question. Feel free to interrupt if you are having any doubts. Now this I want interaction from you guys, because especially I have designed this question for you. So now what you have been given is like you have two semiconductor slabs. One is the p-type dope, another semiconductor is n-type dope, and you don't know actually which slab is p-type dope and which slab is n-type dope. You just know that of course you know the doping concentration and you don't know anything else. So what you have been asked is like you need to differentiate. Just a minute. Yeah. So what has been asked is like you need to differentiate between these two slabs. That is, you need to identify whether slab 1 is of P type or whether slab 2 is of P type, and you have been asked to actually to calculate the mobility. So you don't know any parameters inside the semiconductor other than the doping concentration. So what you have been asked is like you have to do external experiments to calculate the mobility of you can say this particular semiconductor material. So can any one of you unmute and tell me how should I proceed for approaching this question? Note the fact that don't ask me any internal parameters that are internal to the semiconductors. Whatever we have to do, it is external only. So I want some approach. I don't want direct answers. I want approach. That is what matters a lot. Okay, good. Attach your battery first, then you are doing good. So let's say I have a semiconductor slab, correct, and I have applied a potential difference of V, correct. Now again, you can unmute yourself, no issues. Hello. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, then just tell me your approach, because I won't be going forward. I want some interaction with you guys, because I just wanted to check whether your approach is clear or not.
Sir,
Sorry?
in this figure, when we join the p-type and n-type semiconductor, a layer formed depletion rear.
No, don't go over there. See, you cannot directly attach to semiconductor slabs like this. Actually, the PN junction that you form, it's a completely different process. You never do this kind of thing. You have P type doped semiconductor, you have N type doped semiconductor. You can't just touch them and get a depletion layer. So, just experiment with the slabs independently. Don't just combine them.
Okay, sir.
No. We don't need to use the EK diagram. See, your first approach was very correct. You are applying a potential difference across the semiconductor, right? So what will happen because of the potential difference? What will happen? The carriers will move, right? Right? Yeah, electrons will sweep faster, correct? So you will get a drift current, right? Or you won't get it. You should get it, right? You should get the drift current, correct? So now the motivation for giving you the, yeah, correct. So you are going to get a drift current because of this, correct? No, by using, yeah, so yeah, correct. So Aditya has also given a answer like by using the Hall effect we can determine whether whether the material is a P type or N type. However, since sir has not covered it, we will do it differently. See, we just roughly want to guess whether out of this whether which material is of N type and which material is of P type. So what we are going to do over here is like, and thanks, I like interacting with you guys. So what we are going to do, as suggested by some of you, we are going to apply a potential difference across this semiconductor slab. Oh, what happened? Okay.
It is okay.
Yeah. Just a minute. Yeah. So I have a semiconductor slab over here, right? Now, if I apply a potential difference V, I will get a drift current density, correct? Now,
In electric field density.
so,
Electric field.
sorry, can you? Yeah, correct. So now this, what is happening here? Okay, yeah. So this J,
Sir, figure is not.
figure is gone.
Yes, sir, no, it is readable.
It is visible or it is not visible?
Visible.
Visible, right? Okay. Okay. So now what you will do is like you have J drift. Now what you have sigma E, correct? Now what is happening is like now just note down this thing. From the lecture notes you must have observed what is this sigma. Q times N mu N plus P mu P, right? You know this thing, correct? So here I have a mu M, right? Now you know like one slab is having donors and another slab is having the acceptors. So N into mu N for one slab is much greater than P into mu P, and for another slab P into mu P is much greater than N into mu N. So I'm just writing for, let's say, sigma 1 is equal to Q N mu N, and for another slab I will be having what? Q P mu P, right? So now I just want to know that this is given to me, Q is known to me, I just want to calculate this conductivity, correct? If I know the conductivity, then my job is done, right? So now what can I do? So now you know what I can do is like I have applied V and I know what is the current, because what is the current that can flow, because what can I do? I can just insert an ammeter over here, right? And I can measure the current that is flowing, and just by doing V upon I will be knowing the resistance of this semiconductor slab, correct? So I know the resistance now and I want to calculate the conductivity. So what I will do, so from first resistance I will go to the resistivity, and by doing the 1 by resistivity I will get the conductivity, right? So now this is what I am going to do. So you know I know V upon I, right? So now sigma I can write it as 1 upon rho, which is resistivity, which is nothing but Q N mu N, right? So now hence rho will be equal to 1 upon Q N mu N, correct? Now I know the resistance. Now I just want to relate resistance and the resistivity. So so basically this is a very basic formula. R is nothing but rho into L by A, which you must have studied in your school as well. So now hence R is known to me by doing V upon I, and L I know area I also know. I just told you the internal parameters are not known. External, the dimensions and everything will be known to you because I have given you the slab, correct? So now this row I am just replacing with this equation. So this will be nothing but 1 upon q and mu n, correct? So hence mu n, if I want to separate it out, so what it will become, I will just write this v by I as r because r is known to me because I had inserted a ammeter for doing one experiment, and hence mu n I can write L upon q n a, just a minute, q n a into r, right? So this is how I will determine the mobility. And similarly for another slab I will do mu p is equal to L upon q p a into r, correct? Right? Now comes the question like how will you determine whether which slab is having what you can say p type and n type. So what do you guys think, how should I determine it?
Mobility of electron is more than mobility of hole.
Yeah, exactly, correct. Yeah, so this is the exact answer that I want. So once you calculate the mobility, you will know which mobility is higher and which mobility is lower. So for most of the semiconductors, like the mobility of electrons is always going to be greater than the mobility of holes, right? So for the slab, when you are doing the experiment, for the slab whose mobility you are able to find it as a higher, you will be able to know that the majority carriers in that slabs are electrons. So that slab must be n-type doped and other slab must be p-type doped, correct? So this is the basic experiment that I just wanted to let you guys know because we are going to solve a numerical on this. I hope this thing is clear. If you have any doubts, then feel free to interrupt me. Okay. So now this is a numerical based on the same. Yeah, again someone in the chat mentioned the mobility of electrons greater than holes. So yeah, same principle we are going to use. So again this is a question, a silicon sample, it is having the length of 2.5 centimeters and the area is given as 0.1 centimeters square. The silicon is n-type with a donor impurity concentration of 2 into 10 to the power 15 centimeter inverse cube. So we want to so what they have given is like they have done the same thing. They have also measured the resistance and they found out that it is 70 ohms. So they want us to calculate the mobility of the electron in the semiconductor material, right? So this is the formula that I will be directly using now as I have derived it. So mu n is nothing but L upon q into n into AR, where n is nothing but the concentration of the electron in that semiconductor material. And since our dopant concentration is much higher than the intrinsic concentration, we will ignore the Ni plus Ni factor because what is happening is like our Nd is there and plus our Ni is also there. But if Nd becomes much greater than Ni, then I can simply ignore this Ni, right? So now our mobility is nothing but L upon Q into N into A into R, right? So L is nothing but 2.5 just a minute here. L is nothing but 2.5 centimeters. Our Q is nothing but 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19. What is the concentration of electrons that has been given? It has been given as 2 into 10 to the power 15, right? So into 2 into 10 to the power 15. What is the cross sectional area that has been given? A is nothing but 0.1 and the resistance is measured to be 70 ohms, right? So this is 70 ohms, right? So this is nothing but the mu n. So if you substitute the values, all these values, and if you calculate the mobility, then the mobility will come out to be 1116.071 centimeter square per volt second. So this is the value of mobility that you will be able to get, and let's see if it is matching with the option. So yeah, it is matching with the fourth option, correct? So if you have any doubts, then you can feel free to interrupt me. I will move ahead with the further questions. So yeah, based on the same principle, we have another numerical. Gas semiconductor resistor is doped with the donor impurities at a concentration of Nd equal to 2 into 10 to the power 15 centimeter cube inverse, and has a cross sectional area of 5 into 10 to the power minus 5 centimeter square. So our area is given to be how much? 5 into 10 to the power minus 5 centimeter minus 2. Current of 25 milliamperes. It has been given that is induced in the resistor with an applied bias of 5 volts. Correct. So now they have again given us a way basically where we can calculate the resistance as well, but we will solve this question with a little bit of different approach. The length of the resistor and the drift velocity of the electrons is given by. So what they have asked us is like we have to somehow get the length of this resistor and we have to get the drift velocity, right? So now how to calculate this length of resistor? Let's go from the basic equation. So now Nd is given, like it is a n-type doped semiconductor, right? So now we know J drift is nothing but Q n mu n E, right? So now just a minute. Yeah. So you know that the semiconductor, let's say this is a slab. You are applying a potential difference of V over here. Let's say its length is L, correct? So the electric field, as you know from the your school physics, is like potential difference is nothing but field into D, correct? So this D is nothing but L over here. Hence I can replace E with potential difference divided by the length of the semiconductor slab, correct? So this J drift, and what is this J drift? This is nothing but the current density, correct? So how much current is flowing per unit of area? So now I can so I can write it as I upon A, correct, is nothing but Q n mu n, and I am replacing this electric field with this potential difference divided by the length, correct? So now I have this length with me, and this is the exact thing that has been asked, like what is the length of the resistor, correct? So now I will take this L term on the left hand side and I will put all the terms on the right hand side. So we will get L is equal to Q n mu n V into A divided by I, correct? So now I will just put all the values in this equation. So L is nothing but Q is 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19. N is nothing but the Nd concentration that has been given as 2 into 10 to the power 15. The mobility must be given to me. It is 8500. So the potential difference that I had applied was 5 volts. The cross sectional area was given as 5 into 10 to the power minus 5, correct? And when I divide it with the I, so how much current was induced after applying the 5 volts of difference? It was 25 into 10 to the power minus 3, right? So if you put these values in your calci, then you will get that the length of the semiconductor material, that is the resistor, basically will come out to be 0.0272 centimeter, correct? Now the second part of this question, they have asked so they have asked us to calculate the drift velocity of the electrons, right? So the drift velocity, as you know, Vd is given by mu of what type of electrons. So right, so Vd is nothing but mu n into E, correct, the electric field in the semiconductor material. So Vd will be nothing but mu n, and E is nothing but V by L, right? So V by L I know, V I know, the mobility I also know. So the drift velocity I can easily calculate by putting mu n as 8500. The potential difference that I had applied was 5 volts, and the length I had just calculated was 0.0272, correct? So if you put all these values, then you will be able to get the drift velocity as 1.56 into 10 to the power 6 centimeter per second. Okay, I hope it was easy and you understood all this. So if you have any doubts, then please feel free to interrupt. So now this was just one method, right? How we calculated the mobility of the electrons, and this was typically like what we will do. This was the simplest method, as suggested by many of you. We just apply the battery and we use that drift current formula. But for people like us who are into the circuits, we think the circuits in term we think it like a very crazy people, right? So what we will do is like I will just tell you one using the RC circuit how we can actually calculate it. So as you know, I hope all of you had studied the RC circuits in your +2 or even in the first year of engineering, right? So now what we are going to do is like what is the RC circuit? Basically you are applying a source, AC source, right? you have a resistor, right, and you have a capacitor with you. So now this is nothing but the V out, correct? So if you calculate the V out with respect to V in, then you know V out is nothing but this is just a resistor impedance divider, right? So impedance of C divided by ZC plus ZR, this will be V in, correct? Now as you know, ZC is nothing but 1 upon j omega C, correct? So V out divided by V in, if I write, then this will be nothing but just a minute, yeah, 1 upon j omega C divided by R plus 1 upon j omega C, correct? So now V out upon V in terms of the frequency, it will be equal to 1 upon 1 plus j omega RC. I have multiplied j omega C on both numerator and denominator, okay? So now this mod of V out of omega, so upon V in of omega. So this term that you are seeing on the left hand side, it is called a transfer function. So if you are from second year, then you will be getting this in your circuits course or somewhere. So if I calculate the mod, then you know the magnitude of a complex number. If it is a plus jb, it is given by under root of a square plus b square, right? So now this will be given as 1 plus omega rc square, correct? So and if I just take the square on both the sides, V out of omega divided by V in of omega mod square, now this will become 1 upon 1 plus omega rc square, right? So now why I have given you this thing, let's go further. So what I'm going to do now is like I'm defining a particular frequency over there called as omega 3 dB. So at this 3 dB, what is going to happen is like the magnitude square at this particular frequency will be nothing but the half of V out at omega equal to 0, correct? So this 3 dB that you are able to see, so it is nothing but the what we generally call as the 3 dB bandwidth of the circuit. So if we just look the response, then it will look like this. So we just calculate, okay, this is the power, so we will just so we will just go 3 dB below it, and we will calculate at what frequency it is happening, and this frequency is known as the omega 3 dB. Just hold on for a second, I will let you know how I am going to use all of this. So if you just calculate this V out of at omega 3 dB, so I am putting this number as over here. So this will be nothing but 1 upon 1 plus omega 3 dB RC square, right? Now this is nothing half, and I'm putting at omega equal to 0, right? So if I put omega equal to 0 over there, then what it is going to become, it is like it will be just becoming the 1. So now what is happening is like omega 3 dB RC square, right, is equal to 1 plus this is equal to 2. So now what I got is omega 3 dB RC is equal to square is 1, and hence omega 3 dB is nothing but 1 upon RC, and I can say F 3 dB in hertz will be nothing but 1 upon 2 pi RC, correct? Now how am I going to use this, like what I did to derive this frequency? So why did I derive it basically? So as you know from the previous derivations that we had done, so just a minute, so we know that our resistor I can replace this resistor with the semiconductor slab, right? I can replace this with the slab, everything else will remain same, and I will apply the same sinusoidal input that I was applying. The only difference is like this resistor that you are seeing, that resistor will what is going to happen is like I will just replace the resistor with the actual value of this resistor that we can get from that drift velocity equation, right? So now what is happening is like what is our resistor? So let me so the conductivity is what, Qn mu n plus P mu P, correct? So now what am I going to write? So what this resistor will become, so I will just replace this with 1 by rho. So this rho will be Q into n mu n plus P mu P, correct? So now what am I going to do with this? Like if I'm just take R is equal to rho L upon A, correct? So this R will be equal to this rho 1 upon Q n mu n plus P mu P, right, into length divided by A. So this is the value of the resistance that I have for a particular semiconductor device, correct? So now what am I going to do with this is like the method will be something like this. So I know the value of so basically this is the R, and that I can replace in this equation, right? So this R, if I consider like a semiconductor is only having this term, so I will just replace it over here. So what is going to happen because of this is like you will get this Q n mu n into L upon A. So now you have the mu n in terms of R, which is going into this equation, right? So what am I going to do with this? Like how this frequency is going to be measured is like we are going to change the frequency of V in at its amplitude is going to remain constant and its frequency is going to be variable. So we have to use a signal generator, and what is going to happen by changing this frequency, we will be able to get this graph. So what is happening is like let's say you at one particular point you measured it, another point you measured it, another point you measured it, another point you measured it, you measure it like this, and you plot the graph like this for both the slabs, right? So after you plot this graph for both the slabs, then what is going to happen, you will be able to get this F3dB, correct? So what is happening is like you got the F3dB for both the slabs, and this F3dB equation 1 upon 2 pi RC has this embedded mobility inbuilt into it, correct? So now I'm taking this further. So yeah, I have just explained the procedure over here. So you have a signal generator that we are going to use for changing the frequency, and we have a oscilloscope. We will, if I give a V peak sinusoidal amplitude, then I will get a particular V peak to sinusoidal amplitude at the output, and just by doing this, then you are actually going to do this manually, and you are going to get a plot like this, right? So from there you are going to get F3dB. So what we are going to do now is like let's write it for slab 1. So for slab 1, let's assume that it is of n type. Then what is going to be the formula? Then F3dB will be equal to 1 upon 2 pi. The capacitor I can insert from my own value, right? It doesn't have to be dependent on anyone. So this R is nothing but 1 upon Q n mu n, right? And into L by A, correct? So now this F3dB, as you can see, is proportional to n mu n, correct? And similarly, if I do the F3dB for another slab for 2, it will be proportional to P into mu P, correct? So now some of you had said, the mobility of electrons is always greater than mobility of holes for most of the semiconductors that we have studied. It is obvious from this equation that what just happened? Okay, so it is obvious from this equation that the F3dB1, that is of n-type doped semiconductor, is going to be lesser as compared to F3dB2, correct? So F3dB2, let's say this is of p type, correct? So F3dB1 is going to be lesser as compared to F3dB2. So what you are going to do is like you will plot the graphs for both the semiconductors, and you will calculate this F3dB by just taking the point 3 dB below what is your value at 0 frequency, right? So for a particular semiconductor where you observe like okay, for slab 1 the F3dB is lesser as compared to F3dB2, then that had happened because of the mobility of electrons that is present, and that will indicate you like the semiconductor of F3dB is of n type and the F3dB2 is of p type. And by actually getting this F3dB value, what you can do is like you know L, you know A, correct? You know the value of capacitor, you know the length, you know the cross section area, you have calculated the F3dB, you know the doping concentration, you know the charge as well. The only term that is unknown over here is the mobility, correct? So what you can do is like by just using this equation, you can also calculate the mobility by using the RC circuit where R is replaced by the semiconductor slab, right? I hope this question is clear to you, because I am going to give you a homework question that you have to solve and come back with the answer in the next live session. So this is going to be this question, like all the values I have given. The only thing that I have given is like I have not directly given you the dopant concentration. The Fermi level difference I have given to you as 0.3928 electron volts, and I have also given you the intrinsic carrier concentration. So from there you first calculate the ND, that is the dopant concentration that is present, and this concentration is same for ND as well as the Na, right? So now I have given you, and the capacitance value I have given you as 1 microfarad. So what has been asked is like the F3 dB of slab 1 is observed to be 8.9 kilohertz, and F3 dB of slab 2 is came out to be 22.1 kilohertz. So we obviously know from whatever we had discussed, the slab 1 is having the N type and the slab 2 is having the P type, because the mobility of electrons is greater than the mobility of holes, right? So you directly know the answer of this question now, which slab is of N type and which slab is of P type. And by just using this formula, I will just highlight the formula. So just use this formula and let me know the what you can say, the electron and hole mobility. So what you can do is like the length and the cross section area we need in this question, right? So the length and the cross section area, what you can do, you can take the length and the cross section area from this question number 11. Okay, so take it from question number 11. Okay, and just calculate the value of mobility of holes and electrons. Don't worry if it comes out to be some absurd value, because this is not the question that I have taken from a book. It has been just fabricated from me, just to give you an understanding like how you can think differently, like, and what are the other experiments that you can construct to actually get the mobility. I hope this part was clear. So now we will move to the next question.
Sir,
Sorry. Can you repeat?
what about the length and area? It will also be proportional, right?
You are not audible. Can you just
Length
speak a
and
little bit loudly?
area will also be proportional.
Hello, can you speak a little loudly?
Length and area as well also. The area will also be it will be proportional to frequency, right?
I'm
Length
still
and
not able
area.
to. Your voice is not clear. I'm not able to interpret it.
So length, what about the area? Area will also be proportional to frequency, right?
Take it from question 11. See, wait. See, the area must be given. No, the cross sectional area of 5 into 10 to the power minus 5 centimeter to the power minus 2. So just take this area and just take this length. Okay. I hope
So
it's
will it
clear.
be proportional to frequency?
Will it be proportional to?
Will it be proportional to frequency?
Will it be proportional to?
Frequency.
What is proportional to the frequency? Yeah, it is. It will be proportional to frequency. Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. It will be proportional to frequency. Correct. Correct. Mobility will be proportional to the frequency. Yeah. So if you want me to write the formula very clearly, then it will be nothing but Qn mu n divided by 2 pi c L upon A. Okay. Yeah. So you are correct. The mobility will be proportional to the F3 dB. Correct.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
So you know how to.
Just a minute. I guess I made a wrong statement in the question. Wait a minute.
It's not regarding the concept you just taught, sir, but a bit of extension.
Hello. Hello. You are still not audible. Your
I'm
voice is-
audible now?
Yeah, you are audible now. Yeah.
Okay, sir. So in reality, the mobility of charge carriers depend upon the crystal orientation, right? So is it
Correct.
possible to capture those details as well using the second method?
See, the thing is that the mobility is having a constant value. The F3 dB will remain constant, right? Because the resistance of that semiconductor slab is remaining constant. Correct. But yeah, so don't think like see, it is not the frequency that I am varying. It is the F3 dB, the constant frequency that I have plotted over here. No, this point, the F3 dB. Correct. So this is remaining constant, and this will remain constant because your R is constant. And since your R is constant, F3 dB is nothing but 1 upon RC, correct? correct? So since your R is remaining constant, your F3, your C is remaining constant, your F3dB is remaining constant. So that's why your mobility will also remain constant over here.
No, sir. I'm talking about in general, sir. In reality, the mobility depends upon the crystal orientation, right?
Yeah, correct. Correct. Yeah.
The carriers traveling in different planes have different mobilities.
Yes.
So can it capture those details as well, the other constants?
Can it capture? See, yeah. So you will get one mobility, right? Let it whatever it be. Let's say the mobility is different in different directions. Your material is not even isotropic. You got some mobility, right? So all those details that you are telling me now, they will be captured from the concept of effective mass, correct? That effective mass will be putted into that equation of the mobility, correct? So that mobility will be there. It is just that mobility is already there. It is just that we are not able to determine it. We have been told to determine the mobility. Whatever you are saying is absolutely correct. We are just trying to determine the value of that mobility. So using this whatever experiment that I had suggested, right?
Okay, sir.
Yeah, correct. That phenomena, that whatever thing, it is absolutely correct. It will be there. We are just capturing and we are just trying to tell, okay, this is the value of the mobility that is present. So if I just give you a gas semiconductor slab, and in another case I will give you the SI semiconductor slab, then you will get those values of the mobility even by using this type of experiment. Okay, that phenomena is always there inside that effective mass concept, and we are just calculating the value using some experiment. That's it. Yeah, and I guess I had made some mistake in giving a statement. I just said that the F3dB of slab 1 is lesser and F3dB of slab 2 is higher, right? So as you know, the mobility, the F3dB is directly proportional to the mobility. So for N type, your F3dB should be higher, and for P type, your F3dB should be lower. So sorry for the incorrect statement previously, just ignore it. So the F3dB is proportional to the mobility. So for electrons, you will get the higher F3dB. That's it. Yeah. Correct. I hope that's clear. Now we will move to the next question. Just a minute. Yeah. So now what has been asked to you is like a carrier density at which the minimum conductivity of the semiconductor occurs. So some hint from the lecture material, in some of the lectures sir must have also given you some hint like how to solve this type of question. So what we are doing is like we have to get the minimum conductivity. So first we will write the equation of conductivity. What is it? Q into N mu N plus P mu P, correct? Now what we are going to do is like the carrier density, of course it has been given the doping is of N type, correct? So it is an N type semiconductor. So what I am going to do over here is like I will just replace the P that you are seeing now by Ni square by N, just by using the law of mass action, correct? So I will write it like this. So this became the sigma, our conductivity. Now what we are trying to do over here, we are trying to do at what concentration of this N the minimum conductivity occurs. So you know, for this type of questions where you have to find the minimum value of a function with respect to a particular variable, you always use the derivative, correct? So what I am going to do, I am going to differentiate this conductivity with respect to N, correct? So after differentiating, so what I am going to get is like the Q will be remaining, the N will go because the dx upon dx will become just 1, and over here I am just taking this outside because these are constant, and the derivative of 1 by N. So what is the derivative of 1 by N? It's nothing but minus 1 upon N square, correct? Now what I have to do, I have to equate this derivative to 0, correct? So now after equating this derivative to 0, so what am I going to get? The Q will be gone. Mu n I can take on the right side, minus mu n will be nothing but Ni square mu P minus 1 upon N square. Minus minus I am cancelling, right? So N I am going to take it on the left hand side now. So N square will become Ni square mu P by mu N, correct? So the concentration of electrons became root of mu P by mu N into Ni, correct? Now this is the question that has been asked, and let's see if it is matching with any of the options. So yeah, this is the third option that is present over here. And now what has been also asked, like if for this particular electron concentration we also have to find the value of this minimum conductivity. So now to find this value, what I am going to do, I am just going to put the value of this n into the equation of this sigma, this equation, correct? Or you can say this equation, because I already know n, so I will just have the one variable over here. So sigma is nothing but q n mu n plus q ni square by n mu p. So I am putting this value, I am just putting equation number 1 in equation number 2. So this sigma will become q mu n root of mu p by mu n into ni plus q ni square divided by n. So this will be ni, and I am just writing it like this. I am just taking it on the numerator side. This will be multiplied by mu p. So now this sigma became this mu n. I am take this root mu n and root mu n from here I will cancel. So this will become mu p mu n ni plus q ni. Again this root mu p and root mu p from here I am cancelling. So this will become root mu p mu n. So your sigma minimum, right? It became equal to, see, everything is equal. Both these terms are equal. So this will be 2q ni root of mu p into mu n. Correct? Now one question that I want to ask you guys: how do you know whether this value of sigma that I have calculated is minimum value or maximum value? I will tell you what I want to say. Let's say you have a particular function which is going like this, and you have another function, right? So which will be what you can say, it is going like this, correct? So what we are doing by taking the derivative, we are taking the tangent at this particular point, right? So and we are saying okay, the d by dx at this point is 0, but if I go over here, even here the slope of the tangent is 0, right? So even here d by dx is going to be 0 over here. So how you can say whether the value of this conductivity that I had calculated, whether it is minimum or maximum value of the conductivity? Can any one of you unmute yourself and try to answer this question? How are you going to ensure whether this is the minimum or maximum value of the conductivity? Hello. Do you want to make any guess? Any suggestions from any one of you? It is just a basic calculus. Yeah, correct. The curvature of the tangent. Yeah, correct. So what he's saying basically is like if I have a curve like this, if I take the tangent here, then the slope of that tangent was negative, then the slope became 0, and then the slope became positive, correct? So what this is suggesting is like how the slope of the tangent itself is changing. What I was doing initially, I was checking the slope at a particular point. Now I want to check how the slope of the slope is going to change, correct? So what we are going to do is like we will be taking the d square by dx square, and if it is becoming positive, that means the slope is actually, it was negative initially, it became less negative, it became 0, it became positive. So this quantity should turn out to be positive. If this quantity turned out to be positive, then we are confirmed कि yeah, this is basically the point of minima. And if you consider the point like this, here the slope was positive, the slope became less positive, slope became 0, slope became negative, slope became more negative, right? So the d square by dx square should become, what you can say, it should become negative, correct? So now instead of doing this, there was one very simple way to cross check whether it was minimum or maximum. So this is the equation of sigma, right? Q into n mu n into ni square by n into mu p. What happens when n tends to infinity? What happens when n tends to infinity? I'm talking about equation number A. Okay. What happens when n tends to infinity? The second term will tend to 0 and the first term will tend to infinity, right? So that means if I put n as if I put this value of n, if I continue to increase the value of n, then even my sigma is going towards the infinity. So whatever we have value we have calculated, obviously it is not going to be the maximum value, it is going to be the minimum value, right? So if you have any doubt, then what you can do, you can just take this where is this? Yeah, so you can take this d sigma by dn and you can take the second derivative again just to confirm what I had said, and it will tell you this is indeed the minimum value and it is not the maximum value. Okay, now moving to the so we will just solve a few previous year GATE questions and then we will wrap up the session. Okay, just a minute, let me open that. So this is a very easy question, and what is given is like in an intrinsic semiconductor the free electron concentration depends on what? So in an intrinsic semiconductor Ni is nothing but Ni is equal to N0 is equal to P0, right? And this value of Ni I can write it as root of NCNV into exponential of minus Eg by 2 kT, correct? And what is happening with the NC and NV? So NC is basically proportional, so I will just write the equation again, 2 into 2 pi mn star kT divided by h square to the power 3 by 2, and similarly for NV we can write 2 into 2 pi mp star kT divided by h square into 3 by 2, correct? So the concentration of free electrons, it is actually dependent on the what you can say, the temperature of the semiconductor. It is depending on the temperature of the semiconductor, right? Because T is present over here, T is present in NC, T is present in NV, and even the band gap will vary with the temperature, right? So the temperature of the semiconductor, it will vary. The second option is given as effective mass of electrons only. The only term is very important over here because the free electron concentration is depending on the effective mass of both holes as well as the electrons, right? So these two options are not correct. Now coming to the fourth option, the width of the forbidden energy band of the semiconductor, of course it is depending on the Eg, right? So the Eg is the correct option. Is it depending on the bias? No. After applying the bias, what you get is the key there is is it dependent on the bias? Just tell me from this equation, are you able to see any V that is present over here? No, right? So even the applied bias is not a correct answer, and the difference between the conduction band energy and Fermi level only, so this only made this option wrong as well. So only these two options are correct. Now coming to this question number 14. So the silicon is doped with the boron to a concentration of 4 to the power 4 into 10 to the power 17. So what has been given? The boron is the acceptor ion, right? So the P0 has been given as 4 into 10 to the power 17, and assuming intrinsic carrier concentration of silicon, so even Ni is given to me as 1.5 into 10 to the power 10 centimeter minus. So what has been asked is that compared to undoped silicon, the Fermi level of doped silicon. So what has been asked? You have EC, you have EV, you have EFI, right? And now my Fermi level, since it's a p-type dope, my Fermi level will come somewhere over here, right? So this is the Fermi level of the undoped. The EFI is the Fermi level of the undoped silicon, and the EF is the Fermi level of the doped silicon. So what they have asked me is basically the difference of EFI minus EV. EFI minus EF. So this has been asked, correct? So now from your formula of the whole concentration, F Ni exponential to the power EFI minus EF divided by KT, correct? So now if I just take the log and rearrange this equation, then you will know EFI minus EF will be nothing but KT ln of P naught by Ni, correct? So again I am just going to substitute the values over here. So it has been asked that 0.025 is my value of KT, and ln P naught is given 4 into 10 to the power 17, and Ni is also given as 1.5 into 10 to the power 10. So if you calculate this value will come out to be 0.427 electron volts. Note that this value is positive. So let's have a sanity check whether this is correct or not. So this equation is saying the EFI is above EF. So EFI is above EF, and that can only happen in p-type semiconductor, and it has been given that the silicon is doped with the boron, right? So it is the p-type semiconductor. So this is just the sanity check that you can do. So what is happening is the EF is now below the EFI by 0.427, so it goes down by 0.427, correct? So this is the correct answer. Now this is the question again. So what we have been given is a silicon sample is doped, so the concentration of Nd is given to us, concentration of Na is also given to us. So now what has been asked is the approximate number of electrons in a sample. So we have the case of both. It is like a compensated semiconductor, right? So we have to write the equations accordingly, and it is looking like, just by looking like, Na is much greater than Nd, so it is looking like a p-type semiconductor. So now writing the formula, P naught is nothing but Na minus Nd divided by 2 plus root of Na minus Nd divided by 2 whole square plus Ni square, correct? Now what is the value of Na minus Nd by 2? So let's calculate. Na minus Nd by 2 is nothing but 10 to the power 18 minus 10 to the power 15 divided by 2. See, this term is almost 1000 times smaller than this term, so I can easily ignore this term. So what is happening is Na minus Nd, I can approximate it as 10 to the power 18 because this 10 to the power 15 is 1000 times smaller. So now since this Na minus Nd upon 2, what will happen? Na minus Nd upon 2 will come out to be how much? So it will come out to be approximately 5 into 10 to the power 17, correct? Since this value is much greater than intrinsic concentration, correct, I can ignore this term in the square root. So this P naught will become Na minus Nd by 2 plus Na minus Nd by 2, which will be equal to Na minus Nd, correct? So this Na minus Nd, as I have told you, this term is 1000 times smaller, so we can approximate it like 10 to the power 18, correct? So now what has been asked, like the number of electrons. So what they have asked is the minority concentration. This is the majority carrier concentration, right? So we again have to apply the law of mass action to calculate the minority carrier concentration. So N naught becomes Ni square divided by P naught. So what is the value of Ni square? So 1.5 square is 2.25 into 10 to the power 20 divided by P naught. So it is coming out to be 2.25 into 10 to the power 2 centimeter to the power minus 3. So this option must be there. Yeah, so here it is the option. So I hope you were able to understand this question because it was pretty easy. And yeah, so I guess, yes, I will come to the slide. So now you know this is the compensated semiconductor, right? So I guess sir must have explained it, but just to give you a pictorial picture like where it is used. So this is how the MOSFET is actually fabricated step by step in the semiconductor foundry. So in the first lecture I had given you an introduction towards the semiconductor foundry, what it does, right? So you initially just have the p-type substrate and you are trying to do the implants of this N plus. So these are nothing but the source and drain. I am not going too much into the details of the MOSFET now, as it will come in the later part of the course, but just to tell you, on top of the P you want to make a N-type area also. So as said by someone at the start of the lecture, it is not that we take the N-type and the P-type and then we join it. We never do this, and this is not even possible. We have to build the P-type on top of the N-type or build the N-type on top of the P-type. So we have the p type, and we are basically doing the implants of n type over here. So what is going to happen is like you have the Na concentration over here, and now you are introducing the Nd concentration over here as well. So it is not that the compensated semiconductor is just for solving the questions. It is actually there, and unless and until you go through the process of how these MOSFETs are fabricated, you won't be able to understand like where these compensated semiconductors are used. So you initially had the material of Na. Now so you initially had a material of Na. Now for some area, you want to make this area as a n type. So material was p type. Now you want to introduce the doping of Nd such that the material became the n type. So how much doping you should introduce over there? So calculating these value, for calculating these values, this math of compensated semiconductor, this equation, the equations that you are seeing, these are basically used. So you want to make the n type by converting the p type into n type. So this is where the use of the compensated semiconductors come into the picture. And we just have few more questions left, so we will solve it. And yeah, so the question number 16. So what has been given to us is like the dopant concentration is given is 10 to the power 16. So Nd is given to me as 10 to the power 16. So this is nothing but the n naught. Mu n is also given to me. Wait. So mu n is also given to me. Mu p is also given to me. So the complete ionization has been given, and resistivity has been asked. So you know sigma is what? Q into n mu n plus p into mu p, correct? So now what is happening is as you can see, we have the donor impurities, right? So n into mu n will be much greater than p into mu p, correct? So we can ignore this p into mu p term because of this condition, and hence I can write sigma as q n mu n. So my resistivity will become 1 upon q n mu n, correct? And I guess this is what has been asked exactly. So after just putting the values, 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19, the n is given as 10 to the power 16, and mu n is given as 1200, right? So if you put these values, then you will get the rho as 1.92 rho centimeter inverse. So this is the correct answer for this question. And yeah, so and this is the last gate question, I guess. No, we have one more. Okay. So a phosphorus doped silicon semiconductor, it has a doping density of 10 to the power 17 centimeter to the power minus 3, is heated from 100 to 200. Right? So which one of the following is the correct statement? So what they have asked us is like how, in the options you can see, they want us how the Fermi level is moving, correct? So now to know actually how the Fermi level is moving, I am sure sir must have covered this because I have taken this from the lecture material itself. So what happens? You have a extrinsic material, correct? So the curve that you have, it looks something like this, right? So you have the partial ionization, correct? You have the extrinsic region, and here that intrinsic catches up basically. So this is the intrinsic region. So what happens over here, this Ni itself has a temperature dependence, right? E to the power minus Eg by 2 kT, you must have seen it, right? So what happens is like when you heat the material, and once you cross this temperature threshold, then your material becomes more and more intrinsic. So let's say I have a n-type doped semiconductor, correct? So where do you expect its Fermi level to be? It's Cc Ev, let's say this is EFi, right? So you know this, the Fermi level will be near to this Ec, correct? So this is where the Fermi level is. Now what happens when I increase the temperature? See, this material is extrinsic, correct? And now you know at higher temperatures the material starts becoming intrinsic. So material becoming intrinsic means this EF should move towards this EFi, correct? So now only then the material will become intrinsic. So let's see where is this option, like when the when temperature is increasing, the Fermi level actually moves towards the EFi, and EFi is very near to what you can say E mid gap, correct? So the mid gap and Fi are very close to each other, so EF should move towards this mid gap, correct? So as we increase the temperature from 100 degree to 200 degree, the position of Fermi level move towards the conduction band. No, this is not the correct answer. moves towards the valence band, it can't directly move towards the valence band. It moves towards the middle of this energy gap. So this is the correct option, and I hope this is clear to you. If it is not clear, then sir has explained this figure very well. Please go back to the lectures. And yeah, this will be the last question for today. So what has been asked is like we have been given the EK equation, the EK relation, and what we have been asked is like we have been asked to calculate the effective mass, the ratio of effective mass to the actual mass of the electron. So what you know is like the effective mass of electron, I can write it as 1 upon h square or d square e by dk square. Correct. So we have to calculate this d square e by dk square to calculate this me star. Correct. So now let's do it. So e of k is given to be what, a square plus d k to the power 4 a to the power 4, right? So now d e of k by dk, it will come out to be what, k will be here, so 2a k into a square plus 4b k cube a to the power 4. Correct. Now again I have to differentiate it. So d square e by dk square. Now this will become equal to, so this k will be gone from here, 2a square plus this 3 will come outside, so 4 into 3 will become 12 b k square a to the power 4. Now what they have asked, at the bottom of the conduction band, right, the ratio of effective mass. So at the bottom of the conduction band, you know, at the bottom of the conduction band you have k equal to 0. Right. So here k is equal to 0. So this is E K diagram. Correct. So well, but this figure is not exactly the shape may not exactly look like this. I'm just trying to give you the k is 0 for the bottom of the conduction band. So d square e by dk square at k equal to 0 will come out to be how much? 2a into a square. Correct. Because this k will, if I put k equal to 0, this term will become 0. So now if I put equation number 2 in equation number 1, then I can get from 1 and 2 1 upon me star 1 upon h square d square e by dk square. So it is nothing but 2a square. Correct. So now me star became how much? Basically it became h square upon 2a square. Correct. Now what has been asked? We have been asked the ratio of me star upon m naught. So me star upon m naught will be equal to h square upon 2a square into m naught. Correct. So I'm just going to put the value. So wait, let me simplify it further. Replace h cross with h upon 2 pi, so it will become 4 pi square into 2a square m naught. Correct. So I'm just going to put some put the values. So let me write the equation again. Me star upon m naught is h square upon 4 pi square into 2a square m naught. Correct. So if I put the values, then it will come like 6.63 into 10 to the power minus 34 square. Okay. And this will be 4 into pi square will be 9.87 into 2 into a is the constant and its value is given to me as 6.3 into 10 to the power minus 19 joules. So I'm just going to put it 6.3 into 10 to the power minus 19, and a square will be lattice constant has also been given to us. A is nothing but 2.1 Armstrong. Correct. So it will be coming like if you take the square, it will be coming like 4.41 into 10 to the power minus 20, and you have m naught, that is the mass of the free electron. And if you put this, it will look like this. So if you use the calci and if you calculate this value, then just a minute, then this value will come out to be 0.22. Correct. So now let's see whether this answer is present here or not. So yeah, so the option number first is the correct answer. The 0.22 is value is present over here. Yeah, so I guess we have come to the end of the
Hello.
session. Yeah.
This question is only valid for direct band gap, no?
This question is directly valid for. Let me think about it. Wait. Mm. Yeah, correct, correct. So the figure that I have drawn, it is valid for the direct band gap. Now I will tell you what will happen for the indirect band gap. So let me see. Where's the thing? Mm, what? Yeah. So what is the value e of k? A k square plus b k to the power 4 a to the power 4, right? So now just tell me whether e of k can become negative or not. We have k square and k to the power 4 term. So just tell me, for any value of k, can this equation become negative?
No.
No, right? So if so what is the value I can put? So what at what point the minima can occur for this? So what is the what you can say, what is the minimum value for of e of k that you can get? So when I put k equal to 0 over there, the e of k will become 0. And you had just told me कि e of k cannot become negative because it is a even function, correct? So even for the indirect band gap semiconductors at k equal to 0, we will get the minima. But your point is correct. Like if we had some different expression over there, then I cannot just put k equal to 0 over there. We need to literally take dE of k by dk and then equate it to 0 to calculate at what value of k we are getting the minimum of the conduction band. So you're absolutely right. Your point is valid. But it so happens that even for the indirect band gap semiconductors, since the function is even, your minima will come at to k equal to 0.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. Yeah, so now since we are already running ahead of the time, I had few questions to cover. These were taken from unsolved examples of Donald Niemann actually. So what I will do, like the last time, I will just write the answers in as simple manner as possible. And since I will be uploading this recording by tonight, I will put the link to these notes in that description section of the YouTube video itself. So you guys can go through these 3-4 questions that I have, and come back to me in the next session if you have any doubts. And one more thing, yeah, I have also attached some review questions to check your understanding. So if you have finished the week 2 contents completely, then you should be able to answer most of these questions. If you are not able to answer, then please refer to the reference book, ask in the discussion forums, and please get these questions clear before moving on to the further, because this will help you in clearing your understanding and solving the tougher questions in the GATE exam or maybe in the unsolved problems of any reference books. So yeah, so this is all for this session. If you have any doubts, then I am happy to answer. Any doubts? Any problems? Did I make any mistake? You felt that the lecture was boring or something you want me to improve? And by the way, last time I read feedback, like you guys gave very good feedback, and one of the feedback was that I should go little bit slow. So just tell me whether my speed was fast in this lecture or it was slow, or should I reduce the speed furthermore? The speed was okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good, good. Okay, so I will just unshare the PPT. Anyone has any doubts? You can ask. Yeah, the speed was good. Anyone has any doubts? Anyone want to say anything? It can be faster. Okay. Okay, cool. Do you want me to increase the speed, or this was okay? The only advantage that you guys will be getting, if I move a little bit faster, then I can solve more sums. So I had 2 or 3 more sums, and generally I just don't solve the sums. If I get some concept over there, I just try to elaborate whether, because people feel that the sums that we are solving is, they are completely useless. So I just try to give you understanding, just like the sum for the compensated semiconductor, right? So I just try to give you where it is actually used and whether it is a completely useless concept or not. So if you want me to be faster, then it's advantageous for both you and me as well. If any one of you is facing like I am going too fast, then you can go to the recordings and you can stop in between, and you can take your time for solving the questions. So do you want me to be a little bit faster or what? Yes, we most probably we can solve more problems. Also, we can relook in it. Yeah. So yeah, oh, it's okay. So from the next lecture, I can move a little bit fast. So thank you for the feedback. Oh, you want the YouTube link? Okay. Wait a minute. Just a moment. Yeah, so I have pasted the link for the YouTube channel in the comment section. So all of you are welcome to go into that channel. Yeah. Yeah. So we are already over the time. So I hope it was clear to you. And if you have any doubts, then I'm giving one more last chance to ask the doubts. If not, then we will just close this session. Yeah. Welcome. No doubts. Yeah. Okay. Then we will close this session, and I'm unsharing my screen. And have a great weekend, guys, and enjoy your evening. Thank you.